All right, so period 1 and 2. So this is what we're talking about tonight. Okay, so I'm going to jump into this. Hit me on the questions tab if you have questions, and I'll stop throughout and answer those, okay? All right, so period 1 is 3 key concepts, but like I said, it's 5% of the exam. So I'm going to go through it kind of quickly. You could take like an entire college course on any one of these key concepts. So there's plenty of stuff that I'm going to be kind of glossing over. That's just how AP World works. Before we totally jump in, I just want to make sure that you really make sure that you know spice. So if you may have used something similar in your class, like Sprite or Pirates or grapes or whatever other ones are happening now. And so spice is the one that I use. This is going to come up a lot on the exam because any of the questions that you get asked are going to be related to one of these themes. So you really want to make sure that you know these, right? You know the difference between social and cultural. That when it says political, you know that's talking about government and laws, right? When it says economic, it's jobs, it's money, it's trade. You got to make sure you know these 5. So if you don't feel comfortable with them, I do have a video about spice on YouTube that you can watch. You can also, if you have 5 Plus, you can rewatch my stream from the very first way back in September when I did a stream all about spice in the civilizations. So head to that. Make sure you know these ones, right? Persia is another one. They're all the same. It doesn't matter which one you know, as long as you know the difference between these themes. All right, key concept 1.1. So the very beginning is all about early humans and migration. So the entire basis of like where humans live is based on this theory of out of Africa, right? That humans originate in Africa, in sort of Southeast Africa, and then migrate from there, right? So they then will migrate with changing seasons, changing, resources, migrating to survive. And so eventually, after several thousands of years, hundreds of thousands of years, humans populate the entire Earth. Right, so everything originates back in Africa and then will populate out. There's a map. The map of like migrations is a common map. Just make sure that if you get a map that you pay attention to the numbers on it, right? You can a lot of times the question that they'll ask you is just like right in front of you. So just pay close attention to what's written on the map. Isn't it northeast? No, it's southeast in Africa where people originate. It's like let me just pull this up. Actually, it's all right. I'm going to keep moving because, someone will post a link in the chat. So if we could post a link to what that image looks like, it's in sort of the southeast. All right. Okay. So, those early humans were foragers, right? So this means that their lifestyle was completely different than what we're used to. This is before agriculture. So what it meant to be a forager, this is like hunters and gatherers. They lived in small groups, very egalitarian. And that egalitarian means that they were equal, right? So there was no like power structure. You didn't have someone in charge of all of them. You had everyone sort of equal working together to survive. And with that, there's no private wealth. Everything is owned together. So it's not like, this is my thing and I own it. And if you take it from me, that's stealing. It's a lot, more collective than that because the trick here is just survive, right? All right. So those small groups eventually, through the like process of advancements in technology, right? This is the biggest one. It's just like humans' use of fire. So because humans discovered the use of fire, there's a couple of major developments. One is increase in brain size. So, right, this isn't like an overnight thing. This is like through, evolution. But because they start eating food that's more nutritious than just like raw meat, their brain sizes will increase over time, which allows them to then have this complex language. All right, so if you ask the question of like what makes humans different than any other species, like why have humans taken over the earth? Why not any other animal? One of the answers to that is language. right? The size of our brains relative to our bodies is a very big brain. And so we are able to have this complex language. We can process all kinds of ideas, all kinds of, thoughts that are really complicated, that are, not just a couple of noises, a couple of sounds. Like we have full, we've strung together all kinds of theories, all kinds of ideas layered on each other. And then comes the other idea of collective learning, that not only do we have those thoughts and those innovations, but we build on each other. So we literally don't have to reinvent the wheel. Okay, so from that early time where you have foragers, where everyone is like working together to survive, it's not, they have a lot of time, like leisure time in that lifestyle, but it's also like really difficult because you have to literally like find your food. Then comes agriculture, right? The Neolithic Revolution. I spent an entire stream in September discussing about whether or not the Neolithic Revolution was like good for humans, right? Because Jared Diamond, who is an anthropologist, argues that it is the worst thing that could have happened in the history of human civilization, right? Because it leads to power structures and, private wealth and things like, disease. There's a lot of like things that happen because of it. But it also completely changes our way of life and leads us to a place where we can innovate and we could eventually literally take over the world. So you have things like the domestication of plants and animals, and irrigation, which are two examples of ways that humans interacted with their environment in a way that really benefited them, right? So because they were able to create more food, the population increased. So if you're taking notes and you want like a quick phrase to remember that you can use for every single unit of study in world history, when there's more food, there is always more people. Okay, more food, more people, every time. I mean, even just think about it. If someone says, if your teacher says stay after school, there'll be pizza, guess how many more people will stay after school than if there was no pizza, right? More food, more people. The Neolithic Revolution led to the creation of AP tests. Yeah, right? Indirectly, but yeah. Okay, so it also leads to things like specialization of labor. So now because there's enough food for everyone to survive, you no longer need everyone hunting and gathering. People can now work on different things. They can create pottery, they can be blacksmiths, they can be, religious shamans, they can do all kinds of different things. And so that specialization of labor will lead to even more innovation. Now people have specialties. They get really good at something and they innovate. You also have, better transportation, which means more trade. You just have more food and that surplus is going to then be traded. So the connections between, empires will increase. Social stratification. This is like that social pyramid. So now that there is like private wealth, there are people at the top, right? Now there's a 1%, right? And then there's everybody else like throughout the pyramid. So that doesn't exist before. Social stratification is a result of food surpluses, right? People have enough and now they are going to gain more and more. Just another like big difference is that they actually like settle. So rather than being in this like small band moving through, they're really going to settle down. And so like Catalhayek is the first city. So many more cities come after. And that sense of like settling and then building, right? Building walls, the dealing with the like disease that comes with having animals living in close quarters, right? There's lots of like pluses and minuses of not moving around as much. Okay, so but one of the interesting things that we see is that this happens all around the world at all different times. Like everywhere in the world, permanent settlements spring up after the development of agriculture, even though the settlements in like the Americas will happen later. That's just because of migration times. It just literally took longer for humans to get to the Americas. Therefore, there were more years before agriculture, before civilizations. But no matter what, all these early civilizations were all near water, all near rivers, right? So like the Nile, like the Ganges River, like the What are the other ones? The Tigris and Euphrates, right? So you've got all those different, you have all those different rivers, and all of these early civilizations are near rivers or some type of water source. It's not until humans really master irrigation that they can start to move away from the water, right? Because you need to be able to move water to places that don't have it. All right, rounding up period one. See, I told you, period one is going to be quick, quick, quick. 8,000 years of history in like 20 minutes. Okay, so once you have those early civilizations, those permanent settlements, created, they start off as sort of like smaller cities, right? Think of like a couple of bands of people might start to live together, and then that'll kind of grow from there. But then eventually you get actual civilizations, right? So this is your Egypt and Mesopotamia and Shang and China, the Indus River Valley civilization, right? These are those ancient civilizations that you probably studied in like middle school. I'm going to kind of run through basically some big things that they all have in common. I wonder if, all right. So things that they all have in common. This was just true for all of them. All of them are large, powerful states. They have cities, and they have really complicated bureaucracies and armies. So I'm going to explain what a bureaucracy is, because this is always a question. And it's a word that you really need to know, right? This is like an important word for world history. It comes up a lot. So what is a bureaucracy? Think of like a dresser, right? Like a drawer where you might keep your clothes. You might keep different types of clothes in different drawers. It's the same thing in a bureaucracy. You have different departments for the government, right? So you might have war and education and, state and taxes and, whatever else the government does. All right. So is America a bureaucracy? Yes. Most countries in the world right now are bureaucracies. They have different departments that do different things. Your schools are also bureaucracies, right? Your districts. You have different people in charge of different things. You have an attendance office, a nurse, you have the librarian, you have different coaches, right? You have all the teachers and the admin, you have the custodial staff. So just like your school is run like that, so were these civilizations. It's mostly because when you have a larger group of people, it's hard to actually manage them unless you have a system like a bureaucracy to do that. And then, of course, you need a large army to protect yourselves. So it's not, when you have all this stuff, this surplus, people are going to want to take it over. So you've got to have that defense. We talked about this before. So because you have extra food, now you have specialization of labor, right, and wealth. And so all of these early civilizations had that. Monumental architecture, this is like the big pyramids that they're building, the ziggurats, which would have been used for temples, defensive walls. There's a question here of just like an interesting question of like, why do we see that like pyramid shape in so many different places in the world? It is not about aliens. I know you think it's about aliens, but it's not about aliens. It actually has to do with the fact that when you want to build something really, really big, a pyramid is a lot easier than building up because it will collapse, right? So a pyramid you can build even bigger without having the like technology to like really go high. But then beyond that, it's like, it's when you're trying to figure out, I want to build something big and I want it to be the biggest thing possible. If you look around in nature, what are the biggest structures that are naturally there? Mountains. Yeah. Someone just nailed it, right? Mountains, right? So it's not a mistake. Moving along. All of these early civilizations have some form of writing. It really starts because they have to keep track of their taxes, their accounting. So now that you have this surplus of food, if I trade you at a certain point, we need to start writing something down. I can't keep track of what you owe me. But then those things get translated into legal codes. So all of these early civilizations have laws. This is a massive departure from before. in the Paleolithic time, they didn't write down laws. Those didn't exist. They had laws, they had rules that maybe the bands would adhere to, but not in a scalable way, right? So having massive civilizations that you now need to manage, whole different story. All of the leaders in these early societies used like the divine right to rule, which means that they either said that they were chosen by the gods, whichever god or gods that their people believed in, or that they were in fact the god, right? So like in Egypt, the pharaoh was more aligned to be the god, right? But in Mesopotamia, it was more of like chosen by the gods, right? Or like Shang and like future Chinese dynasties, even like mandate of heaven, right? So like divine right to rule. Okay, and then all of these early civilizations are competing against each other. So they have different resources that each other needs. They have different, amounts of food or weapons or natural resources, like iron. And so there's competition between them, and they fight over that. No. Pastoral innovation. This is like innovating in terms of the like needs of farmers, right? Of agrarians. And so this is going to lead to new weapons. So when you think of like the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, these are all based on the types of metals that were used in that time period and mostly used for weapons before anything else. All right. So just want to show you a few pieces of architecture. It's important that you're able to recognize these, because these early civilizations really are the foundations for the rest of world history. And so it's important that you see these and you identify like the regions in which they come from, right? So this is the Olmec head, and this would come from like Mesoamerica, right? I found out that this head was like 8 feet tall. So if you can imagine like little Amanda standing next to this head, it would come up to like, I don't know, here. So that's how big this is. It's pretty massive. But you see this like style of art in the Americas. This would be the ziggurat, right? So used for a temple. This was found in Mesopotamia. Has sort of that flat top. Super massive though. Next. All right, we're gonna head into period 2, but I want to check out your questions because there are so many. All right. What are the key points we should focus on? Everything that I'm saying, I'm narrowing it all down for you. So if you haven't downloaded the slides, download the slides, check them out, and follow that in terms of what should you know. Okay, period 2, I'll come back to. What are some other resources that have helped previous WHAP students better prepare for the exam? If you're in the chat right now and you've taken AP World History already, please post some of your favorite resources so that you guys can all share them. You can also head over to our Discord, which someone will post the link for in the chat. Yeah, so you could use Freemanpedia, you could use Albert, you can use Fiveable, right? So we've got all of our reviews posted. We have like 40, I counted yesterday, we have 45. This one will be the 45th video that I post. So we have something like 20,000 minutes of review posted and all the slides that I've been using all year. So if you like these ones, there's plenty more where that came from. Catalhayek is located in, it was previously like Anatolia, which is present day Turkey. This question of like, would the Neolithic Revolution be more monumental than the Agricultural Revolution? They're the same thing. So it's something that we use interchangeably. So we talk about in the Neolithic Revolution, the Agricultural Revolution, the Agrarian Revolution, all of those things are the same. They're all about the development of farming. And in terms of like, would they be more powerful than say like the Industrial Revolution? That is up for debate. That's such a good question of like, which was more powerful, the Agricultural Revolution or the Industrial Revolution? All right, there's no right answer to that. You could argue that they're very similar, but that, you know, they lead to all kinds of different effects. Okay, we will get to this. What year was the Neolithic Revolution? This was, think of it as like 10,000 BC, or like 8,000 BC, I think is when it like officially starts. It's not like a date. It's more of like around that time, because remember, it happens at all different times. So even though there are agrarian civilizations in like Afro-Eurasia, they don't appear in the Americas for much longer. All right, I'm going to jump back in. All right, let's talk about period 2, because remember, period 1 is just 5%. All right, period 2. So I'm just going to hit the highlights here, okay? So if there's pieces that you're like, oh, I don't know, like she's going too fast, or I feel still confused on this, this is where you need to like make a note that like you got to go back and read a little bit more about this. Or this is, I did a whole stream on Key Concept 2.1 that is up in 5 Plus. This was a good stream. We went through every single religion and did like the major tenets, the historical significance, like major like people connected to that religion. And we just did the whole timeline of history for every single religion. So I'm going to kind of do like a quick glance over the religions. You don't need to know like super specific things about them. You should be able to identify them because they're like, so intertwined in like politics and culture and society and economics. And so it's important to kind of have an understanding of them, but especially like what region they come from, so that you can, associate that. So Judaism and Hinduism, it's like a typo in here. Both come from like unit 1. So in terms of Judaism, just remember that as like the monotheistic religion, like one of the first ones, not the first one, but one of the first ones. Then Hinduism would be it's more polytheistic, but there are many gods, but the people, each like Hindu then like adheres to one god. So it's a little bit of like a hybrid between polytheistic and monotheistic, but it's not necessarily like there's only one god. There are several gods within like Hindu gods. But the big thing to know about Hinduism is the caste system, because this comes up every time you talk about India as soon as Hinduism exists. So you have the caste system, which just like you have that social stratification, this is just based on like where you're born. You can't like get out of that level at all. So if you are born to parents who are part of the bottom caste, then that's where you are. And the only way out of that is to live your life accordingly so that you are then reborn into a higher caste, right? So if you've sort of done the things you're supposed to do according to Hindu, law, Hindu morals, then you would move up in that caste. Or vice versa. If you were up top and you didn't do what you're supposed to do, then you would move down. But it's by birth, and so you can't move out of it. And so that is a big part of like Indian history, because you have this like really strict caste system that doesn't allow for like social movement. Cool. All right, so some of the new religions that come out of period 2, there are several. You've got Buddhism. Okay, so Buddhism originates in India around 500-ish BC. The main idea of Buddhism is to essentially like you can end suffering, end any sort of human suffering that exists by ending desires for like materialistic things. It's kind of at the like root of it. It's very similar to Hinduism because there is reincarnation and this sense of like if I live by these guidelines, then I will be reborn into a higher being, or I will eventually reach enlightenment, which is sort of like the end goal. The difference with Buddhism, though, is that there is not there's not a caste system. So there's no like actual system that is within real life. And so this is why it originates in India and becomes very popular, because it is a similar religion, but without caste. And so if you are in that bottom caste, instead of being stuck down there for the rest of your life, you may decide to, convert to Buddhism and then not have to be, in that stratification. The major person to know is Ashoka. Okay, so in China, there's several different philosophies that you need to know, and you really do need to know the differences between them. So if you're like picking and choosing like what you need to memorize, this is a good thing to just know the difference, know the key terms to connect. So Daoism in China is all about living in harmony with nature, right? This is all about literally the word nature and Daoism. If you remember nothing else, just remember that one word. So if you read any sort of passage and you need to identify which philosophy it may be from, or you might need that, just look for anything that has to do with nature, and that would be Daoism. Okay, so this is all about this balance, right? The yin yang. That would be Daoism. Confucianism is more about strict rules around education, right? There's an emphasis on education. It's an extremely patriarchal society, especially when you think about the 5 relationships, which all have to do with relationships with a man, right? It's like the father and the son and the brother, the king. And so all of those are just men. And so this is very patriarchal. And then you have the idea of filial piety, which is about honoring your ancestors, or you're honoring your family, right? You're your elders. Okay, and then moving over to Christianity in the Middle East. So circa 30 CE, it's sort of like Judaism 2.0, except for Jesus. Pretty similar in a book. But you have Jesus as the Son of God. And then you have Rome, which is becomes sort of like an epicenter for it. And so in the Roman Empire, they first legalized Christianity. So instead of it being illegal to practice, it becomes okay. And then they adopt Christianity as the religion for the empire. So the edict that legalizes it is called the Edict of Milan, and that's in 313. It's another thing to remember. Greco-Roman philosophies. So, you have Greece and Rome in this time period, of course. You don't need to go super deep into these, but understanding that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, who are all students of each other, their philosophies all are around reason and logic. So you can, there's really a lot of questions around how people learn and how they interact and how society should work and how politics should work. And all of them kind of go center on this real logic, is it the best for people? Is it the best for society? Is this the best for a single person, individuals? And then the last one is animism. So you see this more you see animism more in sort of outside the core civilization. So for example, in Native American societies or the Mongols later on, it's just this spirits within the natural world, right? So it's just not necessarily believing that there's an entity that's outside of this world. It's more of within this world, right? So it's part of all the beings that exist. Oh yeah, so we did forget legalism. So yeah, legalism is not on here, but legalism is just anything about really strict laws. Yeah, I left off Zoroastrianism too, because it's not going to be a big part of this exam. It's just the first one. It's monotheistic. Yeah. So it's not, but it's a tiny piece. Okay, moving forward. All right, 2.2, states and empires. All right, so in period 2, you have Persia. All right, so listen, I know it's hard to tell what's exactly going to be on the exam. Obviously we don't know, but Persia is almost never a giant part of the exam. I'm just going to put it out there. It hasn't been before. I can't imagine it's going to be a huge part of it this year. So don't spend too much time memorizing all the different kingdoms of Persia, the empires of Persia. But here are their names: the Achaemenid, the Parthian, and the Sassanid. You've got Alexander the Great and royal roads, right? They've got all these like roads that connect the empire. So if I narrow down what you need to know about Persia into like 5 words, 5 terms, that would be it. Maybe I would also add like Zoroastrianism, right? That would be a part of Persia. China. So you've got the Qin dynasty is only existing for 14 years, but it unifies China. And so it's massively important to the history. So within the Qin dynasty, you also get legalism, and then finally like a centralized China. So they fall after 14 years to the Han dynasty, but they set it all up, right? So then the Han dynasty lasts for about 400 years. Their capital is at Chang'an, and then they've got the Silk Roads that are connecting them with Rome. And so those are sort of like the ends of them. And like massive amounts of trade will happen on the Silk Roads. And China is a big part of that. For example, with items like paper or, spices and what is it called? I'm blanking on some of the names. Dang, it's totally gone. Okay, from China, moving to India. 2 major empires to know: the Mauryan and the Gupta. Okay, so it's in that order. Ashoka was part of the Mauryan dynasty. This is where you get the rise of really the real adoption of Buddhism, right? So Ashoka becomes a Buddhist and rules with Buddhist values. He also uses rock and pillar edicts to then spread these ideas, right? So when you think of rock and pillar edicts, the best way to think of it is, and put this in the chat if you have a good example. Do you have at your school, do you have posters around the school that remind students of like the rules or how to act, right? So think about your school. Do you have any like posters like that, whether they're big or small, of like, don't forget, like if you're late, this will happen to you, right? Like don't forget this like permission slip that you have to bring in, or anything like that remind you of the rules or remind you of like if your school does like some big like, you get like points for showing up on time or something. Don't drool. Yeah, there you go. Right. Maybe in classes too, right? In a class, you might have the same thing where it's like, there's definitely going to be like advertisements for other stuff too. But whoa, no, didn't mean to post that as a question. The only thing I see in my school. So that's what the rock and pillar edicts are like, right? So if you think about how big India is, how do you remind people that live really far away physically about the rules you want to adopt? And this is how Ashoka did it. So these rock and pillar edicts were like carved into these massive stones, and they were just sort of reminding people on how to act, right? On what would happen if they didn't, and what the like Buddhist tradition would be. Gupta would have been after, several hundred years after. The Gupta dynasty is all about like this like golden age of India. So in this peaceful time, you had a lot of innovation, right? When there's peace, people innovate because I don't need to worry about dying in a war or from famine. I can think and I can learn. And so you have a lot of new scientific advancements. You have a lot of lots of new technologies that come out of India at this time. And so Gupta is that, golden age. Greece, the word Hellenistic is just referring to of the Greek culture. And so make sure that you remember that is Greece. Some key facts to remember: democracy. There's a lot of infighting between the city-states, right? Like Athens and Sparta that are fighting each other. And then eventually it's conquered by Alexander the Great. And that's it. I mean, you got your like philosophers. Greece too. Greece doesn't come up a lot on the exam. Greece and Persia are like the ones to skip if you skip them. Rome comes up a whole lot. So one thing to just remember is that there are 3 chunks of Roman history. There's the kingdom, which was the earliest amount of time. Then there was the republic, which Julius Caesar would be connected to. The republic ends when Julius Caesar dies. And then you have the empire. So this is like with Augustus and Constantine. Almost all, no, definitely all AP World questions that you get are going to be about the empire. So don't ever talk about Julius Caesar on the exam, unless they specifically ask about Julius Caesar, which they won't. I don't even think he's in the key concepts. So all about the empire. The things to know about Rome are about, you've got these emperors, you have massive expansion. They are making tons of money from the Silk Roads, and then building a lot of stuff, a lot of like public works, like the Colosseum, the aqueducts. You have, what else? Their laws were written on, like inscribed on what was called the 12 tables. I'm going to get into a little bit more about like some of the rise and fall stuff, but Mesoamerica, you have Teotihuacan, which would have been in Mexico. The Mayans, known for, their calendar. The Mochi, which were in Peru. The Mayans were in like also present day, like Mexico, Central America. Mesoamerican societies, worth knowing a couple of pieces about them in terms of just the fact that they also use, divine right. They also use like the same. Remember when we listed all those things that all societies have? The same is true for Mesoamerica. I've seen questions in these early societies. I haven't seen too many questions about these Mesoamerican societies, just about the later ones, like the Incas and the Aztecs. But these guys like just set the foundation, right? So that calendar, the like rituals around like bloodletting, like the ball game from the Mayans, like these things don't go away. They exist into like the Incas and the Aztecs thousands of years later. All right, so I want to give you a quick rundown because this kind of question comes up a lot. Just in general, why do empires rise? Here are 5 reasons why empires rise. No matter what time of history you were talking about, this is the answer, right? So you've got conquest. So just generally conquering other lands is going to lead to the rise of empire. You have charismatic leaders who bring the empire together, right? So they have, the actual like, you need someone to rally people together and then to lead. The fact that there's a bureaucracy is necessary. You can't have a full force empire without it. You have to have a bureaucracy to manage that size of an empire. Then you have wealth and commerce. You have to have a lot of money to have an empire. It costs a lot. So in order to get that, you need like a really strong trade routes, right? You have to have the connection to other empires. And then finally, you have to have better technology than other people. So potentially through the, potentially through the weapons that you have or the things that you're able to build in terms of like transportation, trade, things like that. So you've got to have superior technology. So these are your 5 reasons. And then I'm going to show you 9 reasons why empires fall. So I'm not going to cut through all of these. I think, honestly, take a screenshot of these or we'll tweet this out as well. So if you follow us at ThinkFiveable, we'll tweet out this infographic because this is a really good thing to remember. Like, again, any empires in all of history that have fallen, whether it's, Rome or the Soviet Union, this is why, right? You have trouble in that like succession of power, right? Who's going to come to power next? There might be tension. There's corruption in the government. You have like decline of martial spirit. People don't want to fight for you anymore, right? So if you go back to this, if you have to have military conquest in order to rise, that means you need a strong army. So if you don't have people who are willing to fight for you, then you can no longer be an empire. You can't defend your people. Escapist religion is kind of interesting. It's not true. It's not like all 9 of these have to be true, but these are the mix of reasons why empires fall. Escapist religion would be like, there's an argument that the rise of Christianity is part of why Rome fell, because people were more focused on their afterlife, their like spiritual afterlife, rather than their like present life, right? Things get so bad in Rome that people are just like, whatever, I'm just going to focus on my afterlife, right? So I'm no longer worried about building and innovating or fighting for this world. I'm kind of focused on the second world. That's not good for your empire if people start doing that. And then, of course, like outside invasion, debt. So these are your like 9 reasons. All right, so the last key concept in this time period is trade. This map is from Freemanpedia. This is a really good map to just show you like really briefly what the trade looks like. You've got in the yellow, you have the trans-Saharan trade routes. In the blue, this would be the Silk Roads. This would be the Mediterranean routes. The green would be the Silk Roads, as well as the red. Right, so both of these would be part of the Silk Roads. And then the purple would be the Indian Ocean Trade Network. Right, so just remember, Silk Roads is not a road. It's not one road, and it's not only about silk. That's just what it's called. But in period 2, all of these trade routes are just beginning. Right, they're just forming. And so they will become pretty powerful, especially like as you have, the Han Dynasty and Rome just really empowering so much trade and innovation throughout the region. Okay, so like I said, silk, sea, sand routes, those are your 3 major trade routes to remember for trade. Some of the new technologies that are created are like yokes, like when you have like 2 animals tied together. So instead of using the power of 1 ox, you can use 2. Or things like saddles, stirrups, sails, the dhows and the junks are boats. So really they're innovating with better ways to transport goods, right? That's what all of these innovations have in common. Trade is so good that if we can get there faster, we will make more money. If we can carry more things, we will make more money. Right? So this is pushing people to innovate. They're figuring out better ways to do it with what they have. Some of the things that they traded included things like rice and cotton. The technologies themselves were traded, like the Qanat irrigation system that went from Persia to Asia. Right, so people bring ideas with them, just like they bring goods. Some of the other things they bring along with them would be disease. There are tons of epidemics of smallpox in this time period. And then, of course, religion, right? So you have Christianity that goes from the Middle East to Europe. You have Buddhism that goes from India to East and Southeast Asia. And then you have Hinduism that goes into Southeast Asia from India. Just some quick picks. This is a Buddhist stupa, just like a sacred ground. These are the aqueducts I was talking about. So these are used for irrigation and built in Rome. The warriors in China, these like stone warriors. Look at how many of them there are. It's so massive. I would really like to see that. The Great Wall of China, it starts to be built in this time period. It's not finished until later, but they start to build it, defensive walls. All right, we done. Okay, so it looks like a lot of your questions have been answered, which is awesome. In the chat, if you look in the questions box, you can see that questions have been answered. So if you had one and I haven't answered it yet, go over and look at it, because a lot of you guys have been doing an awesome job answering the questions together. So we're gonna do a trivia game. So if you don't already have our app, you can play right now. You can download the Fiveable app, or you can go to app.fiveable.me. So on this one, let's see, 50 of you have answered it. I'm just like curious of like, so if I'm sharing this, so which of the following is a similarity between Mohenjo-Daro, Mesopotamia, and Egypt? All three had polytheistic religions. All three were matriarchal. All three practiced Christianity, and all three had the same social system. So they don't all have the same social system. Christianity is not around yet while they're, really in power, and none of them are matriarchal. Okay. Which group attacked and took down the Roman Empire? All right, so which group is the Roman Empire attacked by? This is the Huns and other Germanic tribes. So remember that the Xiongnu is the Han Dynasty, right? The Mongols don't take down the Romans; they come up later. And Spartans and Athenians, they don't take them down. All right, so look, so this question, the reason why you should know this is because of the word nature, right? If you see nature and it's asking about a Chinese philosophy, it is Daoism. So keep that in mind. Yeah, I mean, so the reason why that's correct is because this is just a correct answer, right? So it's asking which one is founded by Lao Tzu, which one is about understanding nature. So the answer is Daoism. All right, I'm gonna close out. Mine is A every time. Sorts by most popular answer. All right, yeah, let's see what the poll said. All right, well, all right. Which phrase best describes the basic belief in Buddhism? So it's just the idea of like getting rid of suffering by reaching this sense of nirvana, this like peace. What example of religious justification was used by the Zhao, Qin, and Han dynasties? Easy. Which of the following is not an effect of the Neolithic Revolution? Read closely. Okay, so social equality is not an effect of the Neolithic Revolution. It's the opposite, right? Social inequality is an effect. The rest of them happen because of the Neolithic Revolution. Yikes. Yikes, guys. Maybe we need to do LEQ for sure. Wow. All over the place. This question stumped you more than questions about history. Well, that's not good. Nope. All right. Well, don't forget, there's 6 points on the LEQ. 6 points on the LEQ. There's 7 points on the DBQ, and 5 and 10 are just distractors. All right, last one. Again, she stressed this. Good. Good. All right, if you said rock and pillar edicts, you are correct. All right, y'all. That's going to be it for tonight. So, if any of you guys are down to just stick around for a little bit and just in the ask a question tab, if any of these questions didn't get answered, to just kind of answer them. So make sure that your questions do get answered. There's a whole lot of questions here. And we'll do more just like open Q&As too. So, okay. Yes, contact me with questions. If you have any questions about, so you just literally want to watch me write an essay live. Just a casual Saturday night. When I think about the best Saturday night I could possibly have, let me watch a teacher write an essay live. I agree. If you need anything, you guys, if you didn't get your questions answered, or you have other questions that you want to ask me, you can email us at hi@fiveable.me, and we will answer whatever questions you have. You can even send us essays that you wrote this year if you want feedback on your essays. If you're writing a practice essay out of like a prep book and you want me to help you with it, send me your essays or send them straight to Dylan and he'll grade them for you. I bet he'd be good at grading them for you. So yeah, and honestly, it's really nice if you like post it on Discord, post your essays on Discord for kind of a group review, or like tweet us a link of like, tweet us a picture of like a thesis statement if you want feedback on it, and we'll grade it. We'll grade it live. Cool. All right, well, I'm out. I hope you guys show up on Thursday night. We've put the link in there a bunch of times. It's also on this page, so it'll be there. And then we'll see you on Monday night. Really make sure you show up. Get your friends to come. This is it. This is crunch time. Everything that you do in the next 4 weeks will matter more about your grade than whatever you've done for the whole school year. So even if you wish you could go back and actually read the chapters and actually do all the things, it's okay if you didn't. You still have 4 weeks to cram. So this is why Fiveable exists, to help you in this 4 weeks. All right, I'm out. See y'all later.